Hello, hello all. Jeri here with your Tip Tuesday for all your crafting needs. Hope you're doing well. Today we are going to talk about some stamping basics. So some of you may know all this stuff already, and that's great. But this is for those of you that might need just a little help with a few stamping basics. So I'm just going to give you a few tips and tricks. And some of these things might be something you've never heard about. So stick around even if you think you know. All right, so first of all, I want to give you just a couple of little bits of information. We have two different kinds of stamps. We have this kind, which is the red rubber, that actually has a sponge kind of layer in it. And this kind of stamp does not require any special surface to stamp on. You can stamp on any hard surface, or you can use our Stampin' mat if you'd like to, but you don't need it because it already has a sponge layer in it. The clear stamps, which a lot of people favor because you can see through them, which is really nice for positioning and stuff like that. They happen to be my favorite. These require that you have some sort of soft layer underneath when you're stamping so that you get a nice crisp stamp. So if you've ever stamped with a clear stamp on a hard surface, you may have not gotten the best stamped image that you could have because you had no soft layer in between. So we're going to show all of that here in just a second. But those are the two types of stamps that we have, red rubber and photopolymer or clear stamps. So a lot of us just call them clear stamps, but they are called photopolymer. So those are the two different types of stamps that, that we carry. Okay, then we have our inks. Now, most of our inks, all of our colored collection is this style of ink pad. These are really awesome for stamping. They actually give you a nice crisp look in your stamp. But there's a couple of tips that you're going to want to know about this kind of stamp pad. This is a sponge stamp pad. This is not a classic felt stamp pad like we think of from, 40 some odd years ago. Then there were not sponge stamp pads. They were all felt, which is what this is. And I'm going to show you that in a second. But these are sponge, and so they're much softer. So we're going to talk about a few tips and tricks for using these particular types of stamp pads. And then we have our Memento Tuxedo Black ink, which is all a traditional felt pad. And so that one's a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about the differences between those and how you want to stamp with each of those as well. So before we get to the actual stamping in and of itself, quick tip on your ink pads while I've got it open. If you guys have not done this already, you're going to want to just kind of do this. Can you see what I'm doing? Don't do it too hard, but give it a little bit of give in your stamp pad when you first get it, because when they're brand new, they're super tight. And then you're going to want to take I have some old chapstick here that I barely have any left of on there, and I run some chapstick along the edges of my stamp pad, and I go back and forth a couple of times, and that really helps it to slide in there and be a little bit smoother for inking. Okay, that's just a little extra tip for the day. All right, so let's show you a couple of things. So when we're stamping with these sponge pads, the difference, like I said, between these and the felt pads is the texture of the pad itself. So with a felt pad, you can tap on it fairly hard. You can see I'm kind of banging it, right? Like, I know that's noisy, but I'm trying to show you. I can stamp on that pretty hard because it's made of felt. I actually do want to make sure I get it pretty well on there, and then I can stamp with that, right? However, if I'm going to use a regular ink pad from Stampin' Up, which are sponge, what you're going to want to do is what I call kissing it. You just barely want to touch it. You don't really want to, I'm just barely tapping it, like barely laying it down. I'm not pushing down into the stamp, okay? And that's going to give me a nice image. All right, what happens if I do push down in there? So if I push down in there, I'm going to get ink all over the place. And what happens when you do that, sometimes, not always, when you go to stamp, you may get more ink than you want. In fact, if you, we're going to talk about a couple of things you don't want to do. For instance, you don't want to rock this motion, because then you're going to get these little ghost prints from ink that may be there. However, if the ink's not there, then you're less likely to get those, but you still don't want to rock. So let's talk about that then. So we've got this, we're just going to kiss it and then stamp. And of course I've made a mess, so let me clean that up. All right. So a couple more things we want to talk about here with our images is that we want to get the ink on there gently. We're not trying to squish it down in, okay? Just kissing it. I'm just kissing it. I'm going, okay? And then I'm going to put it down, and I'm not going to rock my stamp, my block or anything. It's just flat putting it down. Ta-da. And I sometimes leave it there for a couple of seconds. So nice, even pressure is super important. And then making sure you just lift straight up. Now, if your image is stuck, then you can just pop it off. Obviously, if I have a nice big piece like this, usually the weight of the paper lets it come straight off. But if you've got like a little piece, it may stick. So just pop it off. All right. So here's another thing that I want to talk about with your black ink. Very often what I do with the red rubber stamps in particular is I will kind of pat and twist, and then I go back through and I pat. You always want the last thing you do to be to pat, because you don't want any marks on, and I got ink on me, on the image itself if it has any flat spots. And then of course, again, we're just going to stamp. Now I could do this on the hard surface because it already has sponge on it, but I can also still do it on my Stampin' mat as well. And then you get this really great image. Now this image in particular has these little spots in it that are meant to not be inked. So if you're thinking, oh, that didn't look like it inked all the way, it did. It's just the way that that stamp looks. So super important to make sure that you don't over ink, because you'll get those ghost marks. You want to avoid the rocking for that purpose as well. And so depending on the stamp that you're using, especially if you're using like a really fine sentiment piece, you want to make sure that you're doing that straight up and down, and that you stop on the page and then don't rock it. Because when you have like just a line, it's easy to accidentally rock. So just be careful. Also, when you use a block that is too big for the stamp, that happens easier as well. So try to keep your block proportional to the stamp size. That will help as well with that. Any questions? I don't usually take questions on this day, but on my Tip Tuesdays, but I know that this can be a big topic. So I just want to ask if anybody on here live has a question. And of course, if you're watching this later, make sure to ask those questions too. And if you ever don't get an answer from me because maybe I haven't seen your comment and you'd like to have an answer, always feel free to text me. I'm happy to answer those questions. Hello, hello. Uh-oh, yours is freezing. I'm sorry. I hope it's not on my side. So those are just some quick tips for making sure that you are inking things up correctly. For those of you curious about what stamp sets these come from, these are these two awesome Halloween stamps that are in the shop right now. These are online exclusives. If you want either one of them, check them out. Spooky Halloween and Fright Night. They do have dies that go with them as well. In fact, I have a super cool class coming up using the Spooky Halloween. So anyway, I hope you guys feel like you got something out of today's video talking about the different kinds of stamps. Always make sure you clean your stamps too, guys. Make different kinds of stamps and different kinds of stamping that you're going to want to do, different tips to make sure you're stamping clean. If you ever have any trouble with a stamp, something's not stamping clean, you're trying to figure out what maybe you might be doing wrong, be sure to let me know. And like I said, if you have any questions, you need some further help with this, please don't hesitate to ask. All right, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining me for Tip Tuesday. God bless.